Namato Ratana Tayasa. May I pay homage to Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. My respect goes to my parents and my teachers. Hello, good evening, everyone. So today is Wednesday, the 11th of November. So 11/11/20, and this is Achan Sujan from Varapunya Meditation Center, Aberdeen, Scotland. As usual, I am here with you all, bringing some thoughts, some reflections, and some teachings of the Buddha, that how these are relevant to this life and how we can use it for our own current benefit, a benefit for the future, and a benefit at the end, the liberation. So hello Margaret, how Manish, Mahesh, David, Anish, Karina, and everyone, those who have come to join this online ongoing Facebook Dhamma talk. Now in Scotland, particularly at the center, weather is getting very cold, and day by day the temperature is dropping, and meanwhile darkness is increasing. About 8 o'clock we see the clear lights, and by the 4 o'clock it's getting dark, patch dark. So meanwhile the virus, the COVID-19, is still spreading around and getting more and more, and then more tiers introduced. Some places are tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, like that. More lockdowns. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that there is a news about vaccine coming, probably introducing end of this November or mid-December, which is a hope for all of us. Doesn't matter whether that the vaccine will be distributing to all or not, but at least there is progress. There is hope for many of us. And hopefully within few months' time everything comes back to the normal, and everyone will live normal life. And I don't know what is a normal life. A normal life, we call it a day that we can go wander as we want, we do as we want, or now it's limited space, limited time that we can go, and limited association, which has given us a lot of chance to ponder, open ourselves, give us a chance to know ourselves, understand ourselves. And now, rather than changing towards what you want, we narrowed our attention down to what we need. I've heard so many stories that people are clearing out the houses simply because they're too busy during before the COVID, but after the COVID they got a lot of time at home and able to sort out the house, clearing unnecessary things. So there is always uncertain, always changing taking place, and we live with this change and learn to live along with that lines. That's why our life is so beautiful. It's always changing and always challenging. And some part of the challenge is due to the survival instinct, survival and getting a more financial securities, or satisfying ego by accumulation of more materials. And some would go on minimalists, spiritual path, and so on. But we all have a same way of coming into this world. We all entered and stayed with the mom's womb for 9 months in general. And then when the maturity comes and we come out, and we continue our journey in this samsara. For some would live 20, 30, 40 or maximum 100 years. But there are more people who may not be able to survive for a longer period of a time. So, as we come into the world, so we have to go too, which is the definite, we cannot deny. As in the past, I was explaining the dependent origination, that how we are dependent aroused or dependent becoming on the basis of so many other things. And in that discourses, particularly Mahanidana Sutta, when the Venerable Ananda said that I have understood this law of a dependent or interdependent arising, then the Buddha said that do not say so, Ananda. This dependent origination is so deep and so complex. And followed by, when the Buddha was talking about it, and the Buddha mentioned saying that consciousness is the cause to arise the nama and the rupa, the body and the mind. And this consciousness in Pali, or the Buddhist term, is called Viññana. And Viññana is something that's very scary in the Thai tradition. In Thailand, whenever you say Viññān, that means it is referring to invisible beings, such as ghosts, spirits. So it's very frightening stories. And it's very famous in Thailand too, as talking about the spirits and the ghosts coming to haunt you, coming to frighten you, and like that. And this is not just in Thailand. I would imagine it's every culture, particularly in Asian culture, it's very famous. And everybody have a fear of this so-called spirits or ghosts. But this Viññāna is not about the ghost. Viññāna actually is different. Ghosts or spirits, in a way, they are also another type of beings in another realms, as we are. But it's very different. Whereas Viññāna, or which is English translation, is consciousness, in Buddhism is basically the energy, the force that is helping us to thrive, helping us to alive, helping us to be. In the same time, the term Viññāna, or the consciousness, has got the similar interpretation like in the concept of the God or concept of the Creator. a force that is given to the nature, and that's how we are created. So Viññana, when we break the word down, we one and jnana. We here means distinctively, extremely, variedly. It's adjectives. That's we. And jnana is basically means knowledge. So having a knowledge distinctively is the jnana, and that's the energy that Buddha was talking. That's the force that we all have. And in this concept, what we can see is that every living being has got this Viññana. And without this Viññana, then nothing will survive. Everything will just die away. So that's why this energy is so important. And this knowledge is so important. And the same in that discourse, Buddha asked the Ananda, saying that Ananda, if the mother is seasonally okay to have the sperms to be ready for the conception, and the father's sperm is ready. When these two comes together, in that moment, one sperm or zygote starts. And that little dot, which is very invisible, no one can see it. Even a telescope cannot see in the conception time. It takes a couple of weeks, and only then one can see that. That little dot has got the Viññana. And if that dot is there, if there is no Viññana, then that dot doesn't work, doesn't survive. So that's not the breathing anymore. So that's why some people wanted to have a baby, but somehow the Viññana or the consciousness doesn't enter, and then can't have a baby. And that doesn't mean that they are not qualified, but somehow, and sometimes, and suddenly, then again, mother becomes pregnant. So that's why this little dot has to have this Viññana, the consciousness called Patisandhi Viññana, rebirth linking consciousness, has to have it there. Only then a little baby begins to grow. So it's like that. And the Buddha was asking to Ananda, saying that if this Viññana, the consciousness, doesn't enter to the mother's womb in the conception time, would this dot will grow? And Ananda said, no, it won't, Venerable. And then further on, Buddha said that suppose this consciousness, Viññana, enters during the conception time and then stays with this little sperm that becomes now a little baby, and it's called kalala, that this fine dot is called kalala, which has got the consciousness entered. So says pathamang kalalang hoti, kalala hoti aputta pesi. So like that. Yeah? So first of all, it's become a small dot, which is a kalala. And if this kalala hasn't got the Viññana, the consciousness, then that won't call kalala. Just there is no beings at all. But the very moment when this enters into this meeting point between the mother's and the father's sperms and ovum, that becomes the kalala. And that's how the life begins. And the Buddha further asked the Ananda, saying that suppose this Viññana there and kalala is healthy and it's grown, and gradually progressed a couple of weeks or in a few months later, and this Viññana drops. Yeah, this Viññana drops in the mother's womb. Then, that moment, will this so-called baby will continue grow? And Ananda said, no, Venerable, it won't grow. So, it suggests this Viññana, this consciousness, is a so powerful energy that we have inherited from the previously, that coming into in this existence, and that's how we are growing. And if there is no this Viññana is not there, then it won't grow. So we are all in a way have what is called migrated, or we brought our own consciousness from the previous life called Chuti Chitta, Chuti Viññana, the ending life expectancy, and then rebirth linking consciousness. It's called the Patisandhi Viññana, that continue to this mother's womb. So we, depending on mother and a father, our own seed sprouts, and we become alive in that. And somehow, sometimes, because of our condition is different, we may drop out from this mass molecule. This Viññana just drops. Then that moment again, there is no being continue. So this Viññana is an energy that is a force helping us to grow, helping us to be alive. And each breath we take, each time we work, everything is naturally taking place and developing. Some people say that I am born out of my mother or father's negligence. They didn't know who my father is, something like that. And that's a horrible thing. And they blame their parents. But in fact, we simply rely on them to be reborn. Our own action and our own consciousness come into their womb, and with the help of their care and love, we come into this world. And that's how gradually we grow up ourselves as the condition comes together. So because of this Viññana, the consciousness, we become this body and the mind. And this body and the mind, in again itself, is functioning on its own way with the help of this Viññana, the force that always supplying the energy to us. And this force, Viññana, according to the Buddha, the knowledge that constantly supplying to us is coming through the senses. Coming through the senses. That's why it's called eye consciousness, ear consciousness, tongue consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. So that's why it's varied, right? So many different consciousness is there. There is no single consciousness. It's always depending on other factors this consciousness arises. And with this consciousness, this become a cause to have this mind and a body. And each hairs that is growing, each skins that is developing, and each organs that we have are still growing. And that's simply because this energy of consciousness is constantly giving us this continuation. And that's how we are alive. And the very moment when our consciousness leaves, now this Viññana, the very moment when this Viññana leaves our body, hair won't grow. Our body won't survive. Our organs won't work. Everything simply becomes stalled, stationed, and that's how we are pronounced dead. So this Viññana is a force that's always feeding us, always. And this Viññana, as a consciousness, again has got so much power. And every time we engage with the world, it's simply absorbing those powers towards it. And that's why this is a central point. And this consciousness is a knower. The consciousness is the bank, or this saving place. And the practice of Buddha's teachings is basically understanding all other factors of this consciousness, that how the consciousness begins, how the consciousness arises depending on something. And that simply comes from understanding of this, how this depending in one another. And this consciousness is also part of the nama, known as a nama. The nama is simply an object that bends according to the object, other object. Relying on others, this mind or the object is bends towards it. That's why this nama is categorized into two. One part which is actively working, and another part which is laying back in a deeper underneath. So like a feeling that we feel is again conditioned by something that comes to contact, and this Viññana goes and recognizes that, and that moment we feel it. And very moment when we feel, we recognize that this is or that is. And on the basis of that, Viññana basically elaborates it. Oh, this is I don't like, that is I don't like. So that's why the Viññana itself is conditioned depending on feeling, perception, contact arises. So that's why it's a very big topic. Yeah? But when we look at in terms of this way, it's easy to understand that we are born out of our own action or our own consciousness that we brought. And with this consciousness, we continue our life. The day when the consciousness leaves our body or our life will end at that time. And that doesn't mean ending of the whole system. But this consciousness will go on to grab another life, continue another life, until this consciousness itself hasn't got any causes, any efforts, any energies. And this energy the consciousness is having is our greed, our hatred, and our ignorance. We're constantly feeding and constantly giving fuel to this consciousness. It's like you have set the fire, and then you're constantly feeding by wood or any other materials, and you will not be able to extinguish the fire. The fire will go on. Sometimes you just change the fireplace. Early on you are setting up a fire in one place, and then next, a few moments later or a half a day later, you move to somewhere else. But fire continues because you're constantly feeding. One place you didn't feed, so it dies out, and then the fire continues to another place. And there the fire will continue. Similarly, our consciousness is also like that. As long as we have a greed, hatred, and ignorance, and as a result we crave and we act in this world, liking and disliking, pleasure and displeasure, and these things constantly going on, then this consciousness has got this strong energy, and it can pass on again and again into new life and new world, new existence again and again. So the very moment when the consciousness loses or vanishes all this greed, hatred and delusion, that moment you will attain the complete happiness of Nibbana, or the liberation. And that is what Buddha's teachings is about, attainment of complete liberation. So I end here for tonight's reflection on Viññana, or the consciousness, and which is the life force. And with this consciousness we continue in this samsara until the end of our liberation. So thank you everyone for listening, and may you all be well and happy. In a few moments time we are going to have evening chanting and guided meditation. You are most welcome to join with us. Until then, stay safe, take care, and may the Buddha Dhamma Sangha bless you. And good night. See you shortly for the chanting. Sadhu.